All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly Q&A, and I'm looking forward to it. So this week, boy, let me tell you, as I'm following what's happening with the tech space right now, we are definitely moving out of the magic phase of AI and very much into the messy middle of everything. So, if you enjoy these, by the way, I'm live. I have 9 questions, 3 on 3 different topics that I've curated from my community, but I am live, so you can ask whatever, and I will do my best to answer. I do not feed the trolls, though, so if you're just here to troll things or ask stupid questions, I'm not going to answer them. But if you enjoy this, like it, share it, all those good things. I enjoy doing these every week when I have time, and my schedule freed up a little bit, so I've got a little bit of extra time today. So let's get into it. To understand the 3 topics I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to touch on 3 things. One is productivity, and I'll explain what that is. There's some new research coming out of the Wall Street Journal. Anthropic is on record. They're starting to back away from the whole sentient conversation. So is AI becoming alive or whatever? So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on there, why, what are they doing with all that? And then we got to talk about robotaxis, because with the winter storm, I can't even remember the name of it, Fern or something like that. It's been an interesting week in robotaxis and automated drivers. So with that, like I said, I've got my 9 questions. You're welcome to join and ask whatever you want along the way. But the first one has to do with this Wall Street Journal report. They did a big survey, like 5,000 people. This one I'm actually talking about in a lot more detail next week. So I've already got my podcast recorded. That's dropping on Monday. And then I'm writing a Substack article on it on Wednesday that'll drop. But basically what happened, and if you're on Substack and watching this, you can't see it. But if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, you can. But essentially, they surveyed 5,000 workers at different levels. And what they found was there's a mass discrepancy between senior leadership and employees in terms of how they're feeling about whether they're getting efficiency out of AI. It's like a 40% difference, something like that. Senior leaders, about 70% feel they're saving up to 15 hours a week thanks to AI. 40% of everyday workers are like, I'm not really getting any sort of efficiency out of it. Now, it's far more complicated, I think, than a lot of the headlines are crediting it, but it's a debate nonetheless. And so I wanted to talk about a few of the questions I've been getting about it already, because when 2/3 of your employees say they're not really getting much out of AI, but 70% of leaders are saying I'm getting a ton out of it, it's going to cause a lot of friction in an organization. And it's leading to some, even in my consulting, I'm seeing it's leading to some really bad decisions around how people are choosing to use AI. So let's talk about this one, because the first question I got was, so if leaders, these are the senior leaders, are saving like 8 hours was the average per week, by the way. They're saving an average of 8 hours per week, allegedly. But employees are feeling like, yeah, I'm not really seeing none of that. The question they asked was, is it possible AI is not really removing work, but creating more like tasks? So it's doing, fact checking, prompt tuning, things like that. And so workers aren't really seeing the real productivity of it here. Here's the thing. My answer to this is nuanced in that I've got a whole lot of thoughts on this. But in short, when we look at efficiency with AI, when we compare what a senior leader's job is, or what it's supposed to be, compared to what your frontline folks are, they're 2 dramatically different jobs, or at least a majority of the time. It's not that frontline folks or middle management isn't ever doing more strategic work. It's just less of their focus, versus senior leaders. That's supposed to be more of their focus, is the leadership stuff, which AI, at least today, is more intuitive in some of that senior leadership stuff. It can take these massive files and summarize them for you, and this other stuff. If you're responsible for executing tasks, you can't just go chatbot your way through that. It doesn't work. And even if you try, it doesn't do it super well. So you end up spending more time trying to fix mistakes, things like that. And also, I would say we're earlier in the adoption curve when it comes to that. And so it's a complicated mix of things, but I think we have to be really careful with it, because when we're trying to measure things by the same standard and you're talking about two very different pieces of work, you're going to see massive discrepancy. So it doesn't surprise me at all that senior leaders see a ton of value and the folks, responsible for executing the work aren't. The analogy I use in the podcast for next week, talk about the fact it's like, if you have a blueprint, an architect can relatively quickly move a wall. And they can go, yeah, like, let's move this wall over here and see what that looks like. Fine, you can do that relatively quickly. If you're the mason responsible for laying the bricks and you're halfway through building the wall, and the architect shows up and goes, actually, we're changing this now. Actually, I know you're a third of the way through it, but can you actually have it extend out and make a left turn right there? That's going to cause major problems. And you can't just snap your fingers and make that happen. You got to tear down part of the wall. You got to go get more materials. You got to do all this stuff. And that's, I think, what we're seeing with this Wall Street Journal stuff, which is ironic because last week I talked about, I can't remember. Oh, yeah. PwC did this big survey that showed quite a bit in terms of how companies are finding value, whether it's revenue or reducing cost with AI. And so it's interesting now layering on that additional data from the Wall Street Journal. But I think we do have to be careful on this. And like I said, I'll talk about it at length next week. But one of the biggest disconnects I'm seeing right now is senior leaders have a perception they're gaining a ton of efficiency out of AI. And in some cases they are. There's some real efficiency gains that are coming out of AI. But going back to the blueprint versus the wall building analogy, there's a little bit of, not a little bit, in some cases, a lot of bit of cognitive dissonance from senior leadership and the folks doing the work, where senior leadership feels like, and in some cases is, saving time, and they're automatically expecting that to translate over to employees. And so there's this perception that, well, I feel like I've saved 12 hours this week, so you should save 12 hours this week. I'm not seeing that. Clearly, you're doing it wrong. And that's not the case at all. And I think we have to be really careful. So if you're a senior leader, watch it. If you're frustrated as an employee, I get it. And that's part of the reason I wrote the article and did the podcast next week, was to try and help senior leaders understand, like, you need to be really careful with how you're approaching this. And in some cases, one of the things that is actually causing a lot of problems is when you're moving really fast further up the food chain. So when senior leaders are getting all this efficiency around the strategy work, what I'm seeing consistently is it's causing even more problems downstream for the people responsible for doing the work. Because now you can ask your AI tool, ask your AI tool to change your strategy 16 times in 2 weeks. And so leaders are making decisions, making changes on the fly. They're doing all this stuff. And then it's getting passed down to their teams. And their teams are like, what the actual heck? Like, you just asked us to move the wall 4 times. We can't keep up with this. And so what I'm actually seeing a lot of is employees getting bogged down more as a result of AI on the senior levels, because some of the efficiency gains. So it's just something we really got to watch. And I said work slop was going to be a big problem in 2026. That's already the case. But I'm also seeing added burnout, frustration, and some really bad decisions around reducing headcount over this, because decision makers are going, I'm more efficient. I feel like I'm moving faster. I feel like people aren't moving faster the way I am. So therefore, there's a problem with the people underneath me. And so we've got to do something about it. And it's a completely incomplete way of thinking about it. And we've got to change course. If we don't, we're going to have we already have some serious problems we have to iron out. We're going to have even more serious problems if we don't do something about it. So that's that one. But yes, in the sense of, I do think, it's not just removing work, because that's the other thing. I do talk about the fact that time saved, which is what this Wall Street Journal article measured for in terms of AI improvement, isn't actually the only metric we should be looking at. It can be one, but efficiency isn't the only thing AI can do. I mean, it should lead to better product quality too. And that's one of the things I actually find, not just on the senior level, but that's what I'm actually seeing happening on the front lines. Workers who are using AI is they may not necessarily be saving time, but they're improving product quality. So on a efficiency report, it's going to look like they aren't gaining anything. In reality, they are. A good example of this is in software engineering. The whole hype around AI is going to write all of our code. It's not. And companies are quickly figuring that out. But what a lot of the software engineers I know are doing, and where they are finding value, is either A, it's drafting their code first, which is faster and easier. Okay, fine. Or it's editing, or not editing. It's reviewing their code before they're pushing it forward. Are they saving time? Not necessarily, but it's resulting in better outcomes, at least the ones who are using it well. So I think we just got to be careful when we say, well, AI is not saving me time. And honestly, the other problem with AI time saved, we're really bad at estimating your time. If you ask somebody how much time they saved on anything, take it with a grain of salt. Unless somebody actually is tracking their hours, we are so bad at estimating how much time something saved us. People will say, oh, I saved an hour. And it's like, was it really an hour? Like, did you write that down? Did you write down when you started or no? And they didn't. So we just got to be careful of that. So the question too that came in related to the whole Wall Street Journal thing, because the AI layoffs are in full swing right now. I was hoping we'd start to see that change in 2026. If anything, it's maybe not ramping up, but it's still moving full steam ahead. So before I answer this question, let me pull this comment up, because this is one of the non-troll comments I'll actually answer. So I don't like the efficiency of AI. I actually do like the efficiency of AI. I think AI can make you more efficient if you're using it effectively. So it's not necessarily that I don't like the efficiency. I think there's a lot of misperceptions around how it's making people efficient. There's some really bad metrics for how companies and individuals are measuring AI efficiency. Some are just looking at it purely, it's giving me time back. And it's like, well, is it? Or are you just spending it on more wasteful things? And companies are measuring like just revenue or cost savings. Those are okay, but are they actually tied to AI? And can you demonstrate that? And I think that's it. So yes, I am all for the efficiency that can come from AI. I think it's about how are you measuring it and what are you doing with that efficiency? Because that's the other thing that often gets missed. People are like, I'm so much more efficient. And you're like, well, what are you doing with that free time? Well, if you're just using it to scroll TikTok, then I wouldn't call that efficiency. I'd say it's leading to you wasting your time more. So that it's just more complicated than that. But good question. So the second one was, are we in this dangerous transition where leaders are trying to justify leaner orgs based on the hope of AI efficiency tomorrow, even though it's not necessarily proving on the front lines that it is giving the kind of lift? Yes. In fact, if you listen to my podcast next week, my recommendation, just based on my own consulting work, is whatever you think you're going to get out of AI, cut it in half in terms of your projections, especially if you're making these projections at a senior level. And it just has to do with the fact the gains aren't translating into practice. And so unfortunately, though, a lot of leaders are making justifications for reductions in headcount, reductions in budget, reductions in timelines. They're making estimates based on how they feel about AI. I talk a lot about the good vibes that are happening right now in organizations around AI, and a lot of decisions are being made on vibes, not on data or actual like what your eyes see. And so, yeah, we are in this dangerous transition where the risk to leaders right now is, I feel good about AI. I might even be seeing numbers. So last week, I talked about the fact that, yes, some organizations, more and more organizations, in fact, are starting to see the returns. for AI, whether it's an increase in revenue or a decrease in cost. But they're missing part of the story, and they may be seeing a temporary boost in revenue or a temporary reduction in costs that's really debt they're acquiring that's going to come down the line. And so what happens is, and I'm getting called in for cleanup work as much, if not more now than I was hoping. Where people are making mistakes. They're saying, hey, we can not backfill these headcounts, or we can eliminate. There's one org I know of that did some work with that they got rid of an entire function, only to have to quickly reverse on that because they realized, oops, these agents aren't performing at all like we thought. And now we lost all that intellectual capital. This is a major problem for organizations. And so that's where I would say it's not that you can't get efficiency out of it, but leaders and decision makers, especially right now, need to be very careful what their projections are with AI, especially some of the data coming out right now is these models are starting to perform worse in certain areas. And so it's the trajectory isn't moving in a positive direction necessarily. And so if you're making bold or very generous decisions on what you think you're going to get out of AI, you're going to see that show up in a not healthy way in 2026 is what I would say. We're in many cases hallucinating. That's a popular word in the AI space. We're hallucinating how much value we're getting out of AI right now. It's really largely based on our feelings or what we like to see. Okay. The third question on this and last one related to the Wall Street Journal data was, with 40% of workers saying they'd be fine never using AI again. And this is when I did my predictions live stream a couple of weeks ago for 2026, I said the backlash we're going to start to see in 2026 is going to get pretty heated. And this is now showing up in data already, which is wild, but AI is an accelerator. So things that used to take a couple years to catch are showing up pretty darn fast. But in the thing, it talked about 40% of workers are saying you can get rid of AI. I'd be totally fine with never using it again. And so the question they asked was, are we seeing a rebellion of the board where people realize AI generated work feels less meaningful? So there's a couple things that I will say to this. One, AI is definitely, and you're going to see this in the next two things that I'm going to talk about, AI is not living up to the hype, period. And I knew this was going to happen just based on the outrageous and outlandish promises these big tech companies have been making since ChatGPT launched, it is when AI really kind of dominated the headlines. All of a sudden it was going to solve every problem we had times 1,000 type of a thing. And so some of the promises that have been being made since it came out have just been absolutely asinine. They really have. And so when you do that, you're setting up all these false expectations and checks that you are never going to be able to cash. I mean, from the beginning, when they were talking about what AI was going to be able to do, I'm like, I don't care how advanced you think you take this stuff. Like, we are not going to get to this point. And so, yes, now we're 3 years in, 3.5 years in, and people are going, I'm sorry, I thought we were all going to be on a beach somewhere, with unlimited income pouring it, which was not a realistic expectation. I'm a little surprised that how many people kind of bought the AI lies, but whatever. There was a ton of money and a ton of effort going into it, and I think everybody was razzle-dazzled with it. So yeah, I will say people are starting to rebel a little bit against it and go, all right, I'm not really seeing the value in this. I'm going to scrap the whole thing. Where I would caution people, though, and I see that comment. I'll talk about that one. Here's the thing. Okay. Here's where I'll balance this, because anybody who's listened to me for long knows I'm very much an advocate of using technology, but using it with discernment and caution. what I would say, as I'm starting to see people start to kind of push back against the AI and like, we're gonna not use it. And I just saw a thing like it's just being used so poorly and so recklessly. I mean, that's on we're in the perfect storm. There were these outrageous, outlandish claims being made. And then people like had these expectations and it could never live up to it. And so now we're in this absolute firestorm where people are pissed and they're fed up. And I think one of the biggest risks right now is that it's like this is like I was a kid in the 90s. This is like the internet boom, except worse in many cases, in that AI is not going to go anywhere. The generative AI we see is not going to go anywhere. It's going to stick around. And those that adapt and learn how to use it well do have a leg up. And so as I'm starting to see people rebel against it and go, yeah, screw AI, I'm going to go back to the way things used to be done. This is a waste of my time type of thing. I'm like, I would be careful with that, because if you do a full on 180, you are going to fall behind. And people who are figuring out how to adapt with it are going to benefit. And so I think it is, I actually am going to talk about the singularity and sentience here in a minute. I just think you have to be really careful, would be what I would say. And I actually think now is the time for people to focus on AI effectiveness and get past this hype. And in many cases, we're doing it, whether we like it or not. It's just really, really messy right now. I mean, it is really messy right now. It's bad. There's stuff flying out, AI generated slop where it's like, okay, you could have used AI on that, but like, did you get rid of your QC department? I mean, did you ship the code or did you ship that stuff without anybody even checking what you sent out? And so it's wild. Companies are laying people off and then realizing, oh, these agents don't do what I mean, it's not good. But I think what happens, and we saw this with the pandemic, everybody was all for flexible working. And then they kind of got fed up with it because they got sick of being in their houses for so long that then we went back and it was like, oh my gosh, the office is going to be great. And everybody wanted to go back to the office. And it was like, well, okay, now people are irritated because the offices are not what they remember. And that's the risk I think we run with AI is people were so excited for AI and all these things it could do. Now they're finding it's not delivering on these outlandish promises. And so there is a dangerous number of people kind of like going, well, screw it, I'm going to not do anything with it. And I'm like, oh, I don't know that I would go that far, because the people that kind of thread the needle and go, well, I'm going to figure out how to help it make me more efficient, how to help it improve the quality of the work that I do, how to use it in creative ways that expand how I spend my time and, use it to do more interesting things or things that maybe I would have never had the capability to do before. Those people are the ones who are really going to benefit from it. The ones that just go, boo AI, like I'm done with it. I'm like, well, I mean, you can, but I think you're going to, I think it's going to blow back on you. So, this comment here, Selena, regarding the whole AI porn thing, I guess I'm concerned very much about the consequences that are going to come with it. I'm not going to get into this one. I'll have to do this as a topic all on its own. Again, it's been a while. I did do a couple episodes specifically related to AI and adult content and why I think it's so destructive and why we're going to see some real serious consequences as a result of this. And it is bad news. It is bad news. I don't think it's something that we need to necessarily be afraid of, in the sense of like, we got to get past the fear of things, because otherwise it's gonna rule over us. And I think that's where we just got to address it for what it is and be like, can we just get a straight up ban on what this is? Because we've already got people falling in love with chatbots, and people are already not having kids, and it's a mess. So I agree with you, and it's messing big time with people. So I'm with you on that one. Okay. So let's talk about topic number 2, which was Anthropic. Amanda Askell, their in-house philosopher. So Anthropic, out of the companies was on a panel this week, I'm becoming more and more impressed with Google and what they're doing in Anthropic. OpenAI and Meta, yikes. I'm not terribly thrilled with them. But anyway, so Anthropic is starting to question their sentience narrative. Now, going back to outlandish and ridiculous promises for a while, everybody was like, we are on the verge of AGI, like it is right around the corner. And then right after that comes ASI. And once it's ASI, watch out. The world is over. And all of a sudden, the tech companies are starting to back off from this a bit. And Anthropic in particular said, yeah, I don't think this is really what's going to happen, which it's like, yeah, duh. But they're now having, again, they're right sizing their narratives, which is crazy because Anthropic for a while was one of the worst when it came to some of the just stuff they put out there that was like, why are you saying this about AI? This is a terrible way to set expectations. But what Anthropic is on record, if you check out their latest quotes and what they're talking about, is they're like, well, actually, AI is not really becoming sentient at all. It's just becoming a really sophisticated mirror, not a conscious mind. Like, yeah, duh. That is exactly what AI is. It is a very sophisticated mirror that takes what it thinks you want and then it reflects it back at you. And so I say this all the time. I'm like, if you don't like what AI is doing, in many cases, you need to do some self-work because it's just reflecting back what it thinks you want. Now, you could say, well, I didn't ask it for that. It's like, well, you'd be surprised how good at AI is at picking up patterns, picking up subtleties due to privacy, things. It's pulling data in from different sources. So it knows you a lot better than you realize, and which is dangerous. That's why I call it the Shoggoth, because we've got a monster behind this thing, but it's really good at putting on a mask. And so we look at it and we go, wow, that mask isn't all that scary. And why? Super helpful. I like the way it looks. It's like, well, yeah, because it's reflecting back to you what you want to see, type of a thing. So here's the question. Here's some of the questions that I got asked this week about the whole sentience thing. So if an AI is trained on every human book, emotional outburst ever written, which is like everything on the internet, now this is why they're trying to get world data with all these AI wearables, because they want to be able to go grab all this stuff. But if it's trained on all this stuff, are we mistaking this perfect reflection of our own consciousness for a brand new machine soul? And I can't remember who asked this question, but this is exactly what AI is. And I talk about it a lot because I want people to understand this, because once you understand this, this may be one of the most fundamental things you can wrap your arms around to start using AI more effectively. Is once you start realizing, oh, this thing isn't actually thinking, this thing isn't actually, a sentient being of any kind. This is a very complex mathematical algorithm that is matching patterns. It's looking at the tokens coming from what you put into it, what you asked, and those tokens could be words, they could be an image, it could be a document, whatever you feed it and whatever you ask of it. And it's looking at all those patterns, and then it's spitting back at you what it thinks you want. That's all it is. And unfortunately, as these algorithms continue to advance, I talked about it a bunch on LinkedIn this week. We've got to stop personifying this tech. We have to, because I actually think that's one of the dangers of it, is we keep trying to make it sound, act, and think like a person. We try and perfect it to mirror humans. And the robotics, I talked about it last week on the live stream. The robotics teams are getting it, and they're going, why are we trying to make robots like humans? Humans are an engineering marvel that doesn't make any sense from an engineering standpoint. It's kind of stupid to make robots in the image of humans. We aren't there yet from the software standpoint. And so, I mean, this is a fair question. Doesn't the algorithm promote you? Uh, Here's the thing. When you think about AI as a mirror and an amplifier, which I kind of would say they're both, it's a mirror and an amplifier. It can promote and amplify good things if you're using it intelligently, which can be a really great thing. It will also amplify all your flaws and your blind spots. And I think that's one of the biggest dangers with it being a mirror is if you know you're looking in a mirror, you know what you're looking at, and you can work to look at it more objectively so you can see your blind spots. You can bring other people in knowing, hey, this is my blind spot. Take a look at this. Like, is there something I need to do? If you don't know it's a mirror and you think it's doing this stuff independently out of its own intelligence and knowledge and wisdom, you're not going to do that because you're going to go, wow, like AI. And this is what happens when you see people go, hey, I worked with AI on this brilliant idea, and somebody with expertise goes, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Like, why would you think that's going to work? Well, hey, I think you're wrong because AI is trained on everything and it said it was fantastic. And you're like, it said it was fantastic because of how you asked it. It knew you wanted to be told it was fantastic, and you asked it to give you all the reasons it's a good idea. It's not a good idea. And AI, even if you ask, well, I guess here's again where AI can be a helpful mirror. If you know it's a mirror, you can ask it, what am I not seeing here? Be critical. What are the things that you think I would want to see that I'm going to miss? And it'll tell them to you. But again, just like people, you can ask for feedback from folks, but if you're not willing to hear it, or they share honest feedback with you and you just make excuses for why that's not actually the case, I mean, it doesn't do any good. But unfortunately, AI is cosmically and almost comically bad at doing that well. Even if you're really good at prompting it and asking it to do things, you got to be really careful with how you use it. So I guess in that sense, yes. And I think that's where the sentience piece is starting to come to light, is even the AI companies, I think they were so obsessed with believing they were creating something beyond us, a new species, they got sucked into their own cognitive dissonance and actually thought it. And now even they're starting to realize, oh, I guess this thing is what we actually thought it was from the start. And it's like, well, yeah. So there's that piece. The second question I got related to this was, if a chatbot acts empathetic and helps a person solve a crisis, does the biological reality of the soul matter? In a world of loneliness, is simulated empathy good enough? So the question is the good enough rule enough? Like, so if AI gets so good at mirroring us or copying us, is that fine? This is like all my answers to everything. It's going to be complicated and nuanced. And I will also openly admit my worldview heavily influences this, in the sense that coming from a Christian worldview, I will say it is extremely dangerous to ever say, is a reflection of us actually a good thing? Well, I don't even think you have to have a biblical worldview to look at the fact that people just left to their own devices, we don't do so hot. Now, I think Christianity gives an explanation for that, but I don't think you have to be a Christian to say, yeah, people kind of like make a mess of things, and we really mess things up. And take a look at the current state of the world, and you can kind of go, huh, this is the world we've created for ourselves. Nice. So to say, well, isn't a artificial version of people good enough? I would say as a whole, absolutely not. There is something unique and distinct and inspired about humans that, AI is never going to get there. The good enough question, though, I think that's actually a question that you have to evaluate on an individual level. Now, if you're talking about like, is an AI spouse going to ever be as beneficial as a human spouse? Well, no. But if you're talking about like, okay, is a customer service agent for a tier 1 with clear ground rules for escalating to a human customer service agent, like, is that good enough for just kind of those frontline calls that you get where you're trying to, filter through and be more efficient. Yeah, I mean, maybe it can be. And so I don't like when people just go, well, is AI's, artificial humiliation or artificial humans empathy bad or good? Like, well, it depends on where you're applying it and how. Can it be beneficial that it can do a decent job of mirroring us back in the right circumstances? Yes, it can. Can it also be extremely, extremely dangerous? Yes, that is also true. And I think that's why when it comes to where we use AI, the protections we put in around AI, the fact we make sure people have like real human beings in their lives as well, not just falling into this AI echo chamber, which is honestly a lot of what's happening right now. And it is bad news. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, from a worldview standpoint, to start looking at the data coming in on the rapidly escalating rates of isolation, loneliness, just really bad mental health stuff coming in as a direct result of AI. And it all goes back to the fact, I think in many cases, we think the world would be a better place if there was just more of me. And that's just cosmically not true. It just isn't. I mean, I think it sounds good on the surface at first. Wouldn't it be great if your best friend was just like you? That'd be great for about 5 minutes until you realized that actually wouldn't be great, because all of your worst traits would get amplified and it'd get really boring really quick, because there wouldn't ever be anything unique or fun or innovative or different about anything, because it'd just be you on repeat. And so I don't think, AI being a simulation of empathy, it's ever going to be able to accomplish or achieve what humans can. And I think it's very dangerous, and you have to play it with caution. But can it be enough for the right kind of use case? Yes. And I think in many cases where it is now is more than adequate for the kinds of use cases where you should be using AI. For what you should be putting it on, we're there. And that's actually one of the things that I find right now. And that's where I find it interesting that as you look at the data, the models, as they continue to advance, actually start collapsing in on themselves. And I think you reach a point where diminishing returns start kicking in. It just, you can only improve it so far before it starts making just bigger and bigger and bigger messes, which I think opens up risk. Because if we keep going down the path of handing AI over more stuff, as it collapses in on itself, as it does some of this stuff, it goes bad sideways. And I see it on the regular in my consulting work, where companies have made some really what I would consider reckless or foolish decisions with AI, and it does not end well in any situation. It does not end well. I thought this was a really wise question somebody asked. They said, is the shift away from sentience language a tactical move? So they kind of saw through this whole, now Anthropic, who, was saying AI is going to replace all human labor. It's going to be able to do all this. We aren't going to need people anymore. Is their sudden shift just purely tactical? And their question was, if we decide AI has rights, which if we give it personhood and all this other stuff, all of a sudden we open the door for, well, if you give it personhood, then it has to have rights, which means a whole lot of implications, which also means it has to be accountable. And so they said, doesn't it become much harder to treat it and govern it? Isn't it harder to treat it and govern it like a 24/7 corporate tech tool if you say it's sentient? And the person that asked this, I know who it is. It's a brilliant question, because that is 100% a big portion, not the only portion, but a big portion of why AI companies are rolling back their talking points on. This is why AI companies are largely rolling back their talking points on sentience, because all of a sudden the implications of sentience are starting to catch up, and it's costing the AI companies big time. Like when you promise this AI is totally autonomous, can think for itself, all these other things, and then it makes a mistake, I mean, naturally, the company is going to come back and sue you because they're going to go, you told me this thing was sentient. It's not. It's not autonomous. It didn't replace the work of 10 employees. Well, then you get lawsuits. When it's framed up as sentient and then it becomes your teenager's best friend, and then your teenager goes and does something horrible because its chatbot told him to, which I can't count how many lawsuits now are out there because of young people and even adults doing terrible things because of AI. Well, if you were sitting there propping up your tool, not just as this like harmless tech tool, but this sentient being more intelligent than 1,000 humans, you're like, well, who do you think they're going to come after? They're going to come after the AI company. And so AI companies are now going, not only can we not deliver on a lot of these expectations, but the liability of AI is starting to catch up. I mean, there's a lot of distractions in the world right now, but unlike the internet in the 90s, where you had, it took years to start to see the implications. Let's just look at social media as an example. It took a long time for social media for us to really go, wow, this is not good this is not a net positive for society. It can be, but largely ungoverned, this is a hot mess. And it took us a while to figure that out. Now the data is everywhere. They're like, oh, did you know that the like button would cause like massive depression? No, I didn't. Did we know we'd have the body dysmorphia as a result of social media? Oh, geez. Now, granted, some of the documents coming out, people in charge knew. This is like the robber baron days of the oil things and all that other stuff. Good question, Gabrielle. I'll answer that one. But AI does everything faster. This generative AI stuff, these new models that we have, is doing everything faster and faster and faster, which also means the consequences are going to come faster and faster and faster, and they're going to hit harder and harder and harder. And this is what we're seeing. And this is why the AI companies are now starting to back off from their promises. They're starting to back off from the claims of, we're going to hit the singularity point. This AI is going to be able to run the world. They're like, uh-oh, if that's the case, guess who's going to get their corporate headquarters burned to the ground when, it goes sideways? Well, they're realizing this is not going to blow back very well. And so they're largely, rolling it back. Okay, I'll answer this before I get to topic 3. So Gabrielle, how can we learn from our mistakes from the past, like social media? I like to read, Ecclesiastes at least once a week, because I think there's something to be said for the fact there's a lot of wisdom in there, and we don't learn our lessons from the past. We don't like to look at history objectively. We like to make excuses for it. We like to convince ourselves this time we'll do it different. And as a result, we make excuses for this stuff. And then we just walk the same path and end up in the same place over and over and over. Now, to some degree, is there any way we can completely not make the same mistakes? I would say no. And I think that's what the Bible warns about, is like, well, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes until I fully renew everything. Can we reduce the mistakes? Yes. The thing I talk a lot about with this is, one, we have to be willing to objectively look at things. We have to work in diverse groups because we all have blind spots. And like I said, AI is just going to amplify your blind spots. So if we want to learn from the mistakes we made with social media, that means we need to hear from different generations and, different groups of people and all this other stuff and go like, hey, how has social media affected you, types of things. So we can start to look for these patterns and we can start to go, well, there is a mistake. But I think the other thing, and this is a big mistake that we're already getting into now. I watched a thing last night about parents getting really upset, and I'm doing a podcast later this month talking about parenting in AI. Parents right now are demanding accountability from the tech companies. And I think that is largely a good thing. There has been almost no restrictions on this. We basically handed children one of the most dangerous technological solutions in all of human history with no safeguards. Terrible, terrible idea. Going back to, we didn't learn our lesson. That's what we did with social media. And then we went, wow, that went bad. What do we do with AI? Here, kids, have a chat bot. I think the part, though, that we have to be really careful of, going back to how, we learn from our mistakes of the past, is we can go too far and start to look at the tech companies to do it all. And I am not saying AI companies and tech companies should not take responsibility and be accountable for things. And what can also be true in the same breath is we have to take more personal. Well, yeah, that's another one. Babies, AI toys. Like, there are certain points where it's like toy manufacturers, AI companies, like, you are 100% responsible for it. But at the same time, then I also go, yeah, but parents, I mean, I have 8 kids. I oversee the decisions made for my kids. I'm involved in their life. Like, I can't just go, well, tech companies fix this for me. I have a moral responsibility to be a dad to my kids. And so, I think personal responsibility and accountability needs to happen. And so some of the mistakes from social media, I think one of the things we can get in front of now is, now what everybody's trying to do is blame social media for what it did. Nobody wants to go, I kind of got a little too hooked on social media. I mean, even today, you'll see people be like, I really need to get off social media. How many hours did you spend on TikTok last night? Well, yeah, I know. I need to. And there isn't some of the personal responsibility. So I would say, one, we need to learn from the lessons from the past and hold tech companies more accountable, which in some cases we are a little bit. If you look at social media, the tech companies got away with murder. They were able to go, we're not responsible for anything social media does. It's not our fault. And we actually signed that into law, that you can't do anything. It's not AI company, or it's not social media company's fault. We're not there yet. The tech companies, good grief, are they ever lobbying for that right now? So now is definitely a time to not just let this stuff pass, not just let, your Congress people and your political leaders get away with this kind of stuff, and actually say, no, yes, we need to take personal responsibility, but no, we're not just going to say we're fine with no regulation on AI for the next 10 years. Like, absolutely not. When that kind of legislation gets presented, we should be as outraged about some of the things that we're outraged about in the here and now. Like, that kind of stuff is walking into the same trap we walked into, with social media. And we just have to be aware of it. And I think, unfortunately, that's why I do so much of the work I do, is just to try and create awareness around it. To be like, are you aware of these things? Like, are you aware that this is what's happening right now, so you can do what's in your sphere of influence? Carol, I do see your question here, and your comment makes total sense to me. And I think what you described, Carol, and the way that you're using AI is actually a healthy, discerning way to do it. When you have that recognition of what AI is and how you're using it, then you can make smart, discerning choices about it. And then, it's always good to have people in your life who can kind of keep you in check, who you can be like, what are you doing? Type of thing. So yeah, it makes sense to me. And if you have additional follow-up questions, you can DM me, or I'll check your comments here too. Okay. With the time left, I want to talk about topic number 3, which has been a little bit entertaining. I don't know if that's the right word, so don't get mad at me for the word. But this past week has been a nightmare for autonomous taxis. Okay, it's been an absolute nightmare for them. The winter storm has been a complete disaster for autonomous vehicles. In fact, Tesla completely paused all their unsupervised rides in Texas because they literally were sending chase cars to follow their autonomous vehicles around because, I mean, again, AI does not handle unpredictable situations well at all. It only can operate off the data that it has. And so when new things pop up, it just doesn't do well. Well, winter storms, we don't have a ton of winter storm autonomous vehicle data to train them on. And so you throw these autonomous vehicles out in conditions they're not used to. Let's just say it doesn't go well. And so now Tesla's completely paused its unsupervised rides. Waymo got hit out in Santa Monica, California. One of their vehicles hit a kid. And it's causing a whole lot of, hey, what the heck? I like following what's happening. This is another area people are not paying attention to that they at least should be aware of. Military use and AI is, we're spending so much money, and AI is rapidly dominating, and not in the Terminator way that many people are afraid of, in very different ways. The way it's being incorporated into defense weapons, the way it's being incorporated into modern warfare. If you study at all what's going on the front lines in Ukraine, AI has a major role in some of this stuff. So it's really, I guess, interesting would be the best way that I would put it. But the reality is, this whole AI space is blowing up. And so one of the questions I got asked was, so Waymo, okay, their vehicle, one of their vehicles hit a car or hit a kid. And Waymo's response, because again, people are starting to demand legal accountability for some of the things these AI tools are doing. So it hit a kid at 6 miles an hour. Waymo's defense is, well, if a person was driving, they would have hit the kid at 14 miles an hour. Maybe. Maybe that is true. And I didn't have a chance to look into it, at all of this stuff. But it raised the question. The person asked me, like, is it socially acceptable to justify an AI autonomous vehicle accident by saying, well, it would have been worse if a person did? Personally, you can't. In my opinion, you can't. And I think, if anything, some of the things going on right now, and Mrs. Smiley or Miss Smiley Burris, I agree with you. We got to pause this autonomous vehicle stuff. People are not going to accept. I know I ran over your kid, but boy, it would have been a lot worse had a person done it. You can't speculate on a hypothetical and expect people will go, oh, okay, well, yeah, my kid's in the hospital with a broken leg and 5 broken ribs, but you're right. Never mind. Not a big deal, because boy, they might have actually broken both legs. That is the worst defense for this kind of stuff. And I get the AI companies are like, we have the data to prove it. No, you have a simulation. You're running a simulation and you're saying, based on our simulated data, we think a person would have hit them harder. Well, we can't test that simulation. We're not going to. And so you just need to take responsibility for the fact that your autonomous vehicle hit a kid. Just take responsibility for it. I honestly think if we're going to get anywhere with autonomous vehicles, people are going to need to feel way more like the companies behind them are taking responsibility and accountability for what they're doing with autonomous vehicles. Oh, that's where I was going with the defense thing. One of the big things in the defense field right now is, how do we use AI and put it into, I was watching a thing on the new Black Hawk helicopters and how they're making autonomous versions of Black Hawk helicopters that can be, completely autonomous, fly missions type of thing. And one of the things they're saying is they're never likely going to put live troops in it because people just don't trust it. If they see another human flying the helicopter, they'll get in. If you say, here, get in this bird that the door's just open and it's supposed to take you somewhere, people will be like, I ain't doing it. And I think in many cases, this is what we're seeing with autonomous vehicles. Now, there is people who are growing more trusting of them. And I think there are environments where autonomous vehicles in very, safe, repeatable environments could be a thing, closed circuits, things like that. In the real world, people's trust in them is just not there. And then honestly, these companies, because they're trying to avoid accountability, I don't think they realize they're shooting themselves in the foot with any hope of building trust. Like if you're an autonomous vehicle company and you're trying to say, hey, we're going to get behind AI taxis, when your autonomous vehicle makes a mistake and hits somebody, you have to say, we are doing something about it. We are taking this seriously. We are going to make it right with the family where this happened. We are going to look into what happened to make sure that we can fix it. Like, you got to own it. You can't go, well, it's not our fault. A person probably would have done worse. Oh, okay. Well, keep up that strategy and let me know how it goes in terms of building trust with society around autonomous vehicles. And I think that's one of the biggest problems right now is these tech companies are trying to get away with pushing tech forward without taking any responsibility for what they're doing. They want to go, well, it's hard. It's complicated. AI makes mistakes. People make mistakes too. That doesn't work for building trust. You don't go, well, I know I just, screwed you over, but somebody else might have screwed you over worse. So why are you mad at me? That is a great way to destroy trust. And that's what the tech companies continue doing. So, if Waymo, if Tesla, if any of these folks with the robotic or the autonomous vehicles want any hope of getting anywhere, they actually have to not keep trying to make excuses, lie about how the tech's working, try and blame the victims for what happens when things go wrong. Like they actually have to start taking responsibility. So people at least, because I just think they don't understand, and I think this is largely a problem. People grossly underestimate the value of trust. And I see this in organizations in my consulting work all the time. They just don't realize like trust is the foundation of everything. If people don't trust you, it doesn't matter how good your product works. There will be a percentage of people you will always be able to fool. But the vast majority of people, if they do not trust you, will not move forward. And that's what's happening with AI and these autonomous vehicles. And they keep trying to skip it. They keep trying to find the easy button. They keep trying to figure out, how do we get out of legal accountability? How do we get out of this? How do we blame other people when our stuff blows up? You don't. You lean into it. And yeah, you're not going to see these infinite money glitches that you're looking for, but that's because they don't actually exist, and you're making bad bets and it's blowing up in your face. So, okay. Yeah. So the second question. So Tesla recently paused its unsupervised rides, but reports show they were secretly having chase cars follow the robot taxis. If a company has to hide its safety measures to maintain futuristic imagery, isn't it a betrayal of public trust? That was a question I got. Yes. That's all there is to it. Yes, 100%. If you're over here running cover, your stuff isn't doing what you said it did. And rather than taking responsibility, you're trying to hide it. You're trying to lie about it. You're trying to, put in, it's like when people see these autonomous robot demos, and then it turns out it wasn't autonomous. There was a person behind in a VR headset with a controller doing it. People's trust just goes down the toilet. And they're like, okay, well, now I'm not going to, buy a robot from this type of a thing. And the same thing is happening with the Tesla thing. So yeah, it is a complete betrayal of trust. And I think these AI companies are going to start to feel the real weight of the consequences of this stuff. I think people were razzle-dazzled for the first couple of years, and AI seemed like it was delivering on its promises. And these AI companies made a lot of really foolish promises that they could not deliver on. And I think rather than, as they started, and I don't, to be clear, I know some of these folks. Many of them, there are some, many of them were not trying to be intentionally deceptive. They were not trying to screw over the world. Many of them have these kind of like, visionary mindsets where it's like, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. And if you work closely with this tech, I will tell you, if you work closely with this tech, it always seems like it's right around the corner. Follow fusion energy and you'll see the exact same thing. Fusion is always just like right there. We're just going to get it. We just got the plasma. We just got the magnetic fields right. We just, it's right around the corner, and then it's not right around the corner. And so a lot of these AI companies truly did believe they were on the verge of artificial superintelligence. Some still do. And, some are starting to go, yeah, I don't think that's the case. But I think it's one of those things. Once you start to wake up to that, what you do in response matters a lot. And right now, I think, unfortunately, for these tech companies, many of them, instead of leaning in and taking responsibility, being accountable, saying, hey, we overpromised. We want to do right. We want to come in. We want to make sure we're not destroying the energy grid by building all these data centers and completely ruining your lives, and causing your energy bills to double. We recognize that, this AI technology is not delivering quite on its promises, and, executives and companies are laying people off left and right on promises that they can't deliver on, and that's our fault. And so we need to do this. I think part of the reason you're not seeing them take responsibility is the damage they've already caused. If you think you know the damage that AI has caused, I'll tell you right now, you haven't seen nothing yet. Some of these safety reports, some of these reports that I get a chance to take a look at, I'm like, oh boy, when people finally start to click how bad this is, they are going to be extremely, extremely upset. And so anyway, I think that's why the tech companies are kind of trying to freak out, or not kind of trying to freak out. They are freaking out because they're figuring out how to hold it all together. OpenAI is on the verge of financial ruin. I mean, it's pretty bad. But again, like the internet, it's not going to go away, but we're going to have some serious birth pains coming out of this, and we're not going to get a nice, cute little baby on the other side. It's rough. It's rough. And I think 2026 is going to be really ugly, and it might be ugly for a couple more years here as we figure this out. So we'll see what happens. The last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up here. So regulators are investigating Waymo for ignoring school bus stop arms. Yep. Because once again, how often do you run into a school bus arm? Not that much. So how much data do you think AI models had on school bus arms? Not that much. And you can say, well, can't we just train the model to identify a school bus arm? And once it does, it stops. It's not that easy, because you've got to show it in context, and you got to show, well, what do you do and how do you respond to it? And, you don't want the side camera to pick it up on the side of a bus that just happens to be at a stoplight and the car freaks out because it thinks it's in a school zone. Like, it's way more complicated than people realize. So regulators are investigating, why is it doing this? And the question was, does AI lack the situational awareness, the gut feeling a human has when driving near a school that no amount of sensors can truly replace? So here's the thing, and I think this is the problem, and why I think it has more to do with trust than the capability than anything else. Because one thing that people don't like to acknowledge is humans are terrible drivers. We're terrible drivers. Look at the data. I mean, we're busy texting. We're doing stupid stuff when we're driving around. Like, we run things over. We drive drunk. Like, we are terrible drivers. And there are things that AI would never do. So, like, is it better to drive home with your drunk friend than it is an autonomous vehicle? No. Right? Like, get your drunk friend in the autonomous vehicle. I would rather have your drunk friend get in an autonomous Waymo and go home than drive home. And right. So we can't just objectively say humans better, AI bad. We're comparing apples to oranges. Where AI does extremely poorly, and I think this is the thing, is it does not handle the unpredictable well. And so, could it handle school bus arms if every school had some sort of, zone that got projected that automatically, autonomous vehicles knew you're in a school zone, so automatically you're restricted. You have to drive a certain speed, and it's keeping an eye out. It has heightened sensitivity to AI school bus arms in those zones. Like, there's ways you could actually mitigate some of this stuff in a really healthy thing. What it will never be really good at is all of a sudden, something just completely unexpected happened and the data is not there to train it. But I mean, even in terms of reaction times, in some cases, AI is, hey, Cameron. AI is really, really good. Speaking of AI, there's my AI stuff. it's actually really good at doing certain things. Its stopping time is in many cases faster than a human. You hook it up to a LiDAR system, not cameras, because cameras are really easily fooled, but a LiDAR system, it is extremely quick and responsive. So there are some really good things, but I think it is about this mix of humans combined with all of this. Like, could AI systems be a really helpful tool for human drivers to not make some of the really stupid mistakes we do? Yes, absolutely. I think it would be great. The problem is, and this goes back to what I have said throughout this whole thing, trust is in the toilet with tech companies. It is in the absolute toilet with tech companies because they refuse to take responsibility. They don't want to be regulated, and they are doing unthinkable things with our personal data. And so it's like, well, okay, I mean, as it stands today, do I want a vehicle that is hooked up to all of these AI sensors where they're stealing all of my personal data from my vehicle without my knowledge and doing Lord knows what with it? No. If there was a trustworthy, accountable company that was doing serious, real world AI work and was willing to be accountable, was willing to be trustworthy, would I be more open to it? Yes. And this is the problem we're seeing right now is tech companies keep trying to skip what they need to do to actually be seen as a valued partner. You don't cozy up to Washington and pay a bunch of super PACs to try and skirt the rules, try and screw over humanity. Every time you get caught, you lie about it, you gaslight people, you blame, like, you don't do that crap. You actually take responsibility. You tell people what's going on. You're honest with your promises. When you make mistakes, you take responsibility for it. You actually have people's best interest in mind, not just your bottom line. And if tech companies did that, I think we'd see tremendous progress with autonomous vehicles. I think we'd see tremendous progress with AI in the workplace. Unfortunately, the tech companies seem determined to be untrustworthy. And that to me is one of the things I get extremely feisty with on some of these tech boards is I'm like, you want people to buy your product? You want people to use it? Freaking be trustworthy. And if you're not going to be trustworthy, well, then anything you get is going to be short-term gain and it's going to come back at one heck of a cost. And they don't like to hear it. They are convinced, many of them are convinced that they're smarter than everybody else and they're just going to get around the rules and they're going to beat these things. And they're not. They're not. And they're finding that out the hard way in 2026 as things blow up, where people are fed up with a lot more than AI. And because they're fed up with all these other things, people are way more discerning, way more cautious, way more skeptical of anything they see, at least most people. And so the AI companies are feeling the full weight of that. So as it comes to some of these things, do I think there is a world where AI assisted driving could be a beautiful, wonderful thing that could save lives, could make the driving experience better, could, solve real problems? Yeah, I absolutely 100% do. I've consulted on multiple projects where, companies really wanted to do that. Do most of them want to do that right now? No, most of them are trying to figure out how to get around that. And until we fix that, it's not going to happen. So that's what I've got for this week. Like I said, we are quickly moving out of the honeymoon phase of AI, and we're quickly moving into the messy middle where it's ugly. It's going to get uglier for a bit. I think we'll work our way through it, but we've got some real work to do. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Hopefully it answers some of your questions. Hopefully, if nothing else, my goal is to just challenge you to think more and be more aware of some of this stuff so you can develop your own perspectives and opinions on it. You don't have to agree with me. I'm fine with that. My goal is just to represent as much of the nuance and complexity to these situations so you can think critically about it and make wise decisions, because this isn't going away. It's going to be about what we do moving forward. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you on the other side.